Welcome into episode 526 of the Skate Podcast. I am Brian DeFelice, joined by Scott McLaughlin. Bridget is not with us this morning. She had a very busy Tuesday afternoon and night calling both women's Beanpot games, the consolation game, as well as the championship game, Scott.
Yeah, and she had quite the championship game. Unfortunately, my BU Terriers ended up losing in overtime to Harvard. A game that BU really dominated. I think shots were like 46-19. But Harvard ended up winning on a penalty shot in overtime, which I gotta admit is like a pretty badass way to win the Beanpot. And Bridget had a great call on that. If people didn't see it, I know she retweeted it, I retweeted it. But a pretty cool moment. Seemed like the crowd was pretty great at the Garden. I think it was like just shy of 11,000 fans. So seemed like a successful night for the Beanpot, even though my Terriers came up short.
Yeah, that's tough news. I got to make sure I retweet that too. All right, Scott. So while the Beanpot was going on, the women's Beanpot, that is, for Bridget calling that action, you and I were also watching the Bruins and the Dallas Stars. And so we'll get right into that game because they did lose 6-2. And my opening shift is the result of that is they have now broken their 6-game win streak. And really, Scott, as admirable as their 6-game winning streak was and winning 8 of 9 games was, especially on the heels of a 6-game losing streak, their second 6-game losing streak of the season, they needed to bounce back with pretty much exactly what they did in order to salvage their season. So that's the good news. The bad news is that last night is a reminder of just how thin Boston's margin for error is, both between the boards, on the ice, and in the standings, because every other Atlantic Division team that played last night won their games. And there's just, I think I said it last episode, it's just a thankless division right now. Like your reward for winning games is just staying in the mix and not falling out of things. And not that one loss is doing that for Boston, but it's just that reminder of, hey, you got to keep winning. If you want to make the playoffs, you have to keep winning. And so will the Bruins miss the playoffs because they lost to Dallas once after winning 6 games in a row? No. But if this snowballs into another extended losing streak where you have tough games against Vegas and Montreal coming up this week, well, that's where it gets tricky. So it's going to be very important for Boston and their playoff hopes to bounce back this week and not, let's see if they learn the lesson, Scott, right? Let's see if they can nip the losing in the bud and not let this losing streak extend, because they have every reason to do so against some good teams. And if they play the way they played against Dallas, well, they will fall into another losing streak here. So they have to bounce back, and it's not going to be an easy road this week.
Yeah, and we've seen them do both. Like, we've seen them let losses snowball, and we've also seen them bounce back after a bad game. Like, their last loss before this was in Seattle. That was another one that was just a complete stinker, like borderline no-show. And then they bounced back and they won all 5 games on a homestand, and then, made it 6 straight in Chicago. So yeah, let's see if they can make this more like that Seattle game, right? Like, all right, that was bad. Flush it, bounce back. So, two huge games coming up against Vegas and Montreal, and then they have a back-to-back Monday and Tuesday. So really, it's a 4-game and 6-day stretch. So after a stretch here where games have actually been spaced out a little and they've been able to breathe a little, like now you're back into one of these stretches where it's everything right on top of each other. So my opening shift is about this Dallas game, and really, in my mind, the frustrating way that this got away from them in the first period. Because, yeah, it's easy now, like, coming out of it, just be like, oh, well, Dallas is one of the best teams in the NHL. Like, Bruins, just got a reminder of what it takes to beat the best, which is kind of how Marcus Sturm spun it after the game. And I think that's what you say afterwards. But going in, this should not have been an uncompetitive game. In fact, like the Bruins have been playing much better hockey than Dallas recently. The Bruins were the ones who had won 6 in a row, 8 out of 9. Were playing good at 5-on-5. Dallas, meanwhile, had lost 10 out of 12 and were not playing good 5-on-5 hockey, had really been struggling. And oh, by the way, shortly before warmups, news breaks that Mikko Rantanen is out with an illness. So their best player isn't even playing. Like, I'm not going to say it should have been a win, but it should have been a competitive game at the very least. And the reason it wasn't is because the Bruins got into penalty trouble in the first period, which is something they had been better about during this winning streak, and just picked a really bad time for it to creep back in because Dallas's power play was like the one thing they still had going for them. They have the number 2 power play in the NHL. Wyatt Johnston leads the NHL in power play goals. Like, that is where they are dangerous. Like, the last thing Marco Stern probably said to this team in the locker room pregame is like, let's keep this game 5-on-5, boys. Like, keep it 5-on-5. You're going to have a good chance. And then they take 3 penalties, and it's like, it's team leaders doing it. It's just so frustrating. It's David Pastrnak tripping Matt Duchene off a neutral zone faceoff. Like, not even a scoring chance. Matt Duchene, listen, veteran play, kind of skating right over Pasternak's stick, but Pastrnak just has his stick sitting there. Like, just doesn't move it. And it's like, well, yeah, the ref's going to call that. Elias Lindholm skates right into Esa Lindell. And yes, Lindell flops. I think that was a case where it probably should have been both guys call the interference and the embellishment. But whatever, they only called the interference. I know people were mad about this online. The broadcast didn't like it. But I'm like, Lindell has his back turned, and Elias Lindholm was the one with the play in front of him, and he just skates right into him. Like, it's still interference. It still shouldn't happen.
Yeah.
Sure enough, Dallas scores on that power play. Wyatt Johnston, as I mentioned. And then right after that, less than 2 minutes later, Nikita Zadorov cross-checking the corner. And again, I know I saw people complaining about this, but like, it was a cross-check. Could the rest have let it go? Maybe, if they were feeling lenient. But you put yourself in the position for them to call it, and they called it. And then Dallas scores again on that power play. Jeremy Swayman makes a great first save on Maverick Borg, diving stick save, after the Bruins PK had gotten shredded by these seam passes again. But then Bork puts back the rebound. Peak couldn't get there in time, clear the rebound away, tie up a stick, whatever. So now it's 2-0. That comes with 13 seconds left in the first period. And it felt like that was really the deflating moment for the Bruins, where it was like, you're probably just hoping to survive to the intermission with it being 1-0. Now it's 2, and the Bruins just really never found their game after that. I thought they had an okay start to the second period. Then it's 3-0, and it's lights out. I thought they just disappeared after that. So, but it all starts with the penalties, which, like I said, they had been better about. So I don't know if it's worth like totally freaking out about this, but man, it's just like the wrong game to do it. It's like the only thing the Stars have had going recently is a power play.
Yeah.
So what do? You give them 3 power plays in the first period.
Yeah, it really is hard to believe that Dallas had lost 10 of 12, Scott, when you put it that. You watch now, maybe they had a point to prove last night to themselves, but you watch how hungry they were on every loose puck. It felt like there were 10 Dallas Stars on the ice last night at all times. It was one of those games. And you know what's interesting too is that Boston was down 2-0 after the Chicago game, after the first period of the Chicago game, but after that period, I felt like it was still 0-0. I didn't feel like Boston was out of that game. But last night, being down 2-0 after 1, I felt like they were down 4-0. So I'm not. Yeah, it's interesting how they chose last night, where they were playing really well, to kind of revert back to their old habits. But I want to jump back quickly to the first penalty of the game on David Pastrnak, because I want to bring up something that really kind of irked me on that play. And it's what led to the trip. And it was very subtle. But it's a 1 face-off by Boston. And Elias Lindholm won the puck back maybe 4 feet or so. It was halfway to Hampus Lindholm. he was the closest Bruin to the puck. If you're on your toes off that draw, you grab that puck. But he did the old should I stay or should I go move. And so then that gave Matt Duchene the window to be like, oh, maybe I can get this puck. And then David Pastrnak responds with, fuck, I got to try to impede him somehow because he's going to break in here and maybe go past Lindholm, who's kind of uncommitted to the play. And that's what leads to the tripping call on Pastrnak, which, again, he shouldn't have done that because, it was a penalty. And even though Duchene helped it along, but Hampus Lindholm's indecision on that play, in my opinion, was the biggest reason that David Pastrnak takes the penalty on that play. And so I just didn't like that. It's like you just won the face-off. You're like, why are you not on that puck? If it was like right behind Lindholm, Elias Lindholm, that is, and Hampus has to jump up like 7 or 8 feet. Listen, that's a battle for the wingers to jump in. But that wasn't a winger battle. Lindholm won that puck cleanly to the point where Hampus Lindholm and his long wingspan and his long strides, if he's on his toes and ready to go off the draw, collects that puck and the Bruins do a, high defensive zone regroup. So I just wanted to mention that. I don't know if you picked up on that.
Yeah, it's a good point. And this is why any coach will tell you faceoffs are a 5-man game. Like it's not just on the center. Like, yeah, he has the first job, but it's everyone else has to help out. So yeah, it's a good point. Like if someone's not on their toes, ready to go right off the draw, like that affects the entire play. So yeah, it's a frustrating way to start the game, and they did end up killing that one. So like there was, that didn't completely derail them. And I thought they played a decent first period for the most part, until those second 2 penalties late where it really got away from them. The Elias Lindholm interference that comes with a little over 4 minutes left in the period, 4:17. So you're still in a 0-0 road game. I think shots were pretty even at that point, and it was really on the power play that Dallas just started piling up the shots. Like I said, that you see why they're the number, even without Rantanen out there. Like you see why that's the number 2 power play. Like their puck movement and the way that they open up seams and just like crisp, quick cross ice passing. It's like, yeah, man. Like if you're not on your game, like you are getting stretched, Swayman spinning all around. Like it's. You see why it works so well for that team. And again, shame on the Bruins for giving them 3 opportunities in the first period. Like that's one where you kill that first one. It's like you should consider yourself lucky and be like, phew, all right, let's stay out of the box the rest of the period. And they just couldn't do it.
They're a big team, huh, Scott? Especially their top forwards. I mean, Mikko Rantanen, as you said, wasn't even in the lineup. He's one of the biggest forwards in the league, probably, especially when it comes to skilled forwards. Same with Rupe Hintz. Same with Jason Robertson, who, by the way, again, I would have liked him on Team USA. Just saying.
It was a fun night last night for USA management because you had Robertson obviously having a great game, and then Cole Caulfield in Montreal playing hero. So two high end scorers left off the Olympic team.
Yep. And then you had Jamie Benn, he's in a limited role now in his career, but he's still a big boy out there. And Esa Lindell, and I think Miro Heiskanen is probably a little bit bigger than maybe one would think. I think he's probably 6'1". He always looked smaller to me. I always thought he was small, but he's really not. He's decent size. Labushkin back there. So they're a big team to play against. But they also have a lot of smaller forwards like Wyatt Johnston and Maverick Bourque and others who play bigger than they are. I mean, the compete on Dallas last night, again, like I said, maybe it was one of their better games of the year, but they were everywhere. Like I said earlier, it felt like they had 10 guys on the ice at all times. And that's partly because Boston wasn't moving their feet at a certain point in the game. To your earlier point, Scott, I thought the Bruins, their first period was fine. You take that penalty early, you kill it, you get your own power play, Dallas kills it, you're kind of back and forth. The last 5 minutes of the first period killed them. You would have loved Andrew Peeke to find that rebound on that Swayman diving save. I think that could be a big momentum changer in the game if that score stays 1-0 and you kill that penalty. But of course, it goes into the back of the net. And then the second period, I thought Boston came up pretty good, pretty competitive until, that third goal by Dallas. And you said it before we started recording. Then the sails just went right away for Boston. And then and that third goal was, again, I don't like that third goal on by Swayman. I don't like that third goal by anybody. The Bruins in the faceoff circle last night got smoked. They lost 65% of the faceoffs. They got smoked. Dallas was controlling play and possession off every draw. And that was another example where they just want to draw clean, and it's a simple shot from the point that finds a way through. And then they score. If Boston wanted any hope at coming back in that game, that all went away when it was 4-0 off of a nothing play in the dying seconds of the period. So I didn't like that goal on Swayman, but I also didn't like those goals on the 5 guys in front of him either. So it just felt like once it got to a certain point on the scoreboard, Boston just kind of deflated. And, they were able to salvage some, I don't know if you want to call it a momentum for going forward or feel good. I don't know. I mean, they could have lost that game 10-0 instead. In the last 5 minutes or so, they find a way to get 2 past Ottinger, including Morgan Geekie, who you would have loved to see his first goal in 13 be a shot that, he snaps one in or something. I don't know if a tipping goal gives you the same confidence as one of those, but maybe it does. So yeah.
David Pastrnak is, by the end of the season, I don't even know. I think there is probably somewhere I can track this, but I'm going to be interested to see where he ends up in deflection assists, which someone does track that, at least on a team-wide basis. I don't know if it's tracked for individuals, but he's had a bunch of these now, especially this recent stretch where, it's a Pastrnak shot tipped in front. Yeah, I mean, I guess the silver lining is at least the Bruins showed some push late. I don't know, at least they didn't completely roll over the last 10 minutes of the game, but you would have maybe grasped onto that a little bit more if that had been there to start the third period, where it's all right, even though it's a 4-0 game, you show some fight, maybe get to 4-1, and then you score another garbage time goal and ends up 4-2 or 5-2 or something like that. But it didn't even happen to start the period because Jason Robertson scored twice early in the third period. Swayman gets pulled at that point, which, that's a tough one. Usually you don't want to pull a guy during the third period. You might do it at the second intermission. But that game was just, I don't know. I think Stern probably just felt why not? Why the team didn't really come out any better in the third. So why leave Swayman in there for 7 or 8 if God forbid it got that bad? So I think it's probably more that than anything. But yeah, I don't know. And it does bring up, I'll be interested to see who starts Thursday now. Korpisalo just started Saturday, so this isn't one of those Swayman started 3 or 4 in a row. This is, his first start since Thursday. So it's not like he's tired at all. You could go with him for Vegas and Montreal and keep that going, or do you go to Korpisalo for Thursday? Because hey, Korpisalo's won his last 3, and Swayman just had a rough one. Not that he was alone, right? If anything, Swayman actually kept him in this early on and probably prevented it from turning into a runaway earlier than it did. But eventually, yeah, there were some goals I didn't like either down the stretch. So I'll be interested to see how Sturm handles that for Thursday.
Yeah, me too. I wonder if I would go with Korpisalo. He did get the last 10, 12 minutes of the game. So he got some touches. He's feeling good the last couple of games he's played. Maybe you allow Jeremy to kind of just have a little extra time to shake that one off and gear up for what's going to be a big home game on Saturday. I believe it's Saturday, right?
Yep.
Yeah. Against Montreal, right? That's how you spin that. Hey, Jer, take some time here. Gather yourself. We kind of hung out to dry at times as well. Get it ready for Saturday. And Jonas, big one for you, because you are the one who's going to try to get us back in the win column here. So it kind of gives both goaltenders something to work towards, right? It gives both of them extra meaning for the next starts. Jonas, get us off the schneid. And Jeremy, we need you on Saturday. It's a big one. Boston, Montreal, Saturday night. So I think that's maybe how you play that. But then again, I have no idea. Before we continue on this game, Scott, I forgot to mention off the top, we're going to do a mini mailbag as this episode goes along. So thank you all for submitting those questions. We'll get to as many as we can and continue to send us questions over the coming weeks here, because there is going to be a bit of a lull in terms of Bruins games to talk about once we get into February. Of course, the Winter Olympics will be taking over, and we'll be talking. Is a skate pod going to turn into an Olympic pod? Why not? I mean, it's international best on best. It's going to be the soup du jour.
Yeah, yeah, we can obviously cover hockey. I think there's going to be a ton to talk about there. I mean, look, our name's the skate pod. You know, that doesn't specify which kind of skating. Like,
right.
Let's cover some figure skating.
Yeah.
Quad God? You familiar with the Quad God?
I'm not. But yeah, you raise a good point.
He's gonna be one of the stars of the Olympics. I'm kidding. We're not gonna cover figure skating, but
is it Marty St. Louis?
Yeah, good point.
That guy, quads for days. Here are the comments. Yeah, Bridget's away and Brian and Scott are just talking about guys' quads. Guilty as charged with the quads, Scott. All right, so back to the Bruins Dallas game. If you're trying to draw positives, because there aren't a ton, we talked about Geekie getting back on the score sheet. Fraser Minten, he continues to play well and find the back of the net, so that's good for his confidence. I thought that if you're trying to find Bruins players who I thought brought the intensity to the best of their ability all night, sometimes when your team is just not playing well, you can be, as an individual, be trying hard and being intense, but you're kind of, there's only so much you can do because everybody around you isn't playing well. So I tried to find Bruins who I thought may have been playing better on an individual level than the team's play would indicate. And I feel like Charlie McAvoy was one of those guys. Like, I felt like Charlie was trying to do things to shake things up. He was engaged physically. He was trying to make the right play. I just felt like a lot of the Bruins forwards were just skating in quicksand, and the team in general. I just felt like a lot of players were in quicksand mentally, physically. I just didn't think anybody was playing a quick game or a sharp game. And, if you're McAvoy and you're trying to make the right play and plays are dying on other people's sticks and it's going right back down beneath your goal line, it's tough. I thought McAvoy was trying to do his part. I thought that the Tanner Jeannot, Sean Corrali, and Mark Kastelik line, I thought they were trying to do their parts throughout the game. And other guys on shifts here and shifts there. I thought Aspro was trying. I'm not saying the other guys weren't trying, but if we're talking about guys who I thought brought the necessary intensity for most of their shifts, those 5 players kind of come to my mind. And then after that, Scott, am I missing anybody?
Yeah, I thought the second line, Middlestad, Zaka, Arvidsson, they had a couple good shifts. Mm-hmm. Like, I wouldn't go so far as to say they had a good game by any means, but they had a couple shifts where it was like, around 2-0, 3-0, where it was like, hey, at least they got down in Dallas's zone and spent some time there. They weren't especially dangerous, so like, I'm only going to go partial credit. But it was more than most of the team was doing. So yeah, you're not, there's no highlighting any real overwhelming positives, but in terms of like at least seeing some effort, some pushback, I thought that line had it for a little bit, and yeah, I mean, eventually it got away from the whole team, but yeah, feels like fishing a little bit though, just to even try to find any positives in this one.
Yeah, no, it's unfortunate because, like we said earlier, this was a really good opportunity for the Bruins to give us a very competitive game, right? Like, Boston's playing some of their best hockey of the season. They're some of their most disciplined hockey of the season, which, again, surprise, surprise, to your point earlier about the penalties. It's the recipe for success for the Bruins is not this crazy mystery. It starts with being disciplined and staying out of the box. Now, did they take 10 penalties yesterday? No. But you took too many in the first period, right? And you give the second best power play in the league 3 opportunities in the first period. You know, you're gonna make your own bed and have to lie in it. So you wanted to see the Bruins go up against a good team, even though Dallas has been struggling. You wanted to see a measuring stick contest for the Bruins, and I don't know. I feel like it was like a combination of like the Bruins had one of their shittier games of the year, and Dallas probably had one of their better games of the year. So I think if those two teams were to play 10 times, I think that, you know, you'd probably get a couple of games like that, maybe one in either direction, maybe a couple more in Dallas's. But for the most part, I think, you know, 6 or 7 games between those two teams is probably a hard fought game. And that's just, you know, with the Western Conference teams, you only get 2 cracks at them each year, one at home, one on the road. So I don't know when the Bruins play Dallas next. I'm sure they're going to want to have a receipt game for them. It's probably sometime in March because we know February is pretty bare. But the good news is for the Bruins, you have a chance to show what you show that you've improved this year with a win against Vegas and a win against Montreal. You won a win against Montreal this year. They obviously got you pretty good last time in Boston. Vegas beat you 6-5 earlier in the year, but that game was like 6-2 in a third period, and the Bruins made that one close. So if you're the Bruins, if you feel like you squandered an opportunity to show yourselves who you are against some of the league's best, good news and bad news, you get 2 more chances this week. So good luck.
Yeah. March 31st is the return trips. That's late in the season. That's only a couple weeks left.
That could be a huge playoff implication game for Boston, as I'm sure they all will be.
One last thing I wanted to mention on this game, and then maybe we can go to a few mailbag questions. Marco Sturm afterwards, his conversation with Brick on Nesson, and he did this in his post-game press conference too with media that was there, but Brick asked him, like, are there any positives you can take from this? And somewhat jokingly to start, but then he went into it more. Sturm said, the positive is actually that we got pounded today. And then he went on to say, that's a positive because it shows me and hopefully everyone that they were willing, meaning the Stars. You can tell these guys play in the playoffs every year. They play that grinding game. We were not willing to play that grinding game with them, and that was the difference. I think that's something we have to learn if we want to be like the Dallas Stars and be in the playoffs every year. We got to be willing to grind every night in every period from the top players down. Which that was an interesting quote for a few reasons. Like, one, clearly, I think Sturm is clearly using this as a teaching game and not a throwaway game. Not like, just burn the tapes. We had an off night, happens. Like, he clearly sees a lesson in here of like stuff he wants to show the team, which I think is good. And I think we've gotten that from Sturm a couple of times this year, where it's like right away in his post game press conference, you can tell it's like he already in his mind has the tape cut up for the meeting, either the next day or in this case they're off Wednesday, so it'd be Thursday morning skate. And then the last line too, but being willing to grind every night in every period, brief pause, from the top players down.
Yeah.
So again, like, subtle little message to your top guys that like, you don't get to just have a game where you kind of float and hope it comes easy. Like, this Bruins team has to be a grinding team, and that has to be everyone. So he's not going to name them, but like, yeah, your Pastrnaks and Geekies and Elias Lindholms and McAvoys and like all of them. It's like, yeah, look at what the start, like, look, how many battles did Jason Robertson win behind the net last night? Like, we talked about him scoring 2 goals and being involved, but like, he was winning pucks off your defenseman down low. So, and look, I think the Bruins can do that, and they've done that plenty this season. Like, we've seen this team have success by grinding. That's what they have to do. But it's not a bad thing if you take it the right way to get this kind of wake-up call from, again, despite their recent struggles, a team that I think everyone knows is one of the best in the league.
Yeah, I think it's a fair point. I think the human element of what happened last night, I think part of it, if we're being honest, is, and I'm not making excuses, the Bruins sucked. They they should really be pretty ashamed of how they played, and they need to rectify that going forward. But you got the siblings trip. You're in Dallas. Little too much square dancing. A little too many shots of whiskey probably. the days leading up to that game, they probably had a good time. And I think that, I don't know. Sometimes you're on a 6-game winning streak. You're with your siblings. You're having a good time. You come out, you get stopped by the best team in the league or one of them when they're on their game. And that's I'm not saying for certain that that's the case, but I'm sure that there was a human side to of their family being around them. You would think that it would inspire them. I'm sure it did, but they're also enjoying life with their family on the road. It's not often that their family can see what it's like to live a day in their siblings' lives as professional athletes. And that's probably, I wouldn't be surprised if there was some lingering effects from that. That's not an excuse. You're professional, but let's be honest here.
Yeah, and it does, because I saw people speculate oh, were they like hung over? Are they out with the siblings? And it's like it doesn't even have to be anything that egregious. It can just be you got too loose, right? Like you're riding high. You've won 6 straight. You're having fun. Brothers and sisters are there. Like you're doing pull ups and they're interviewing each other, and like it's a really loose environment. Sometimes your focus slips. Like sometimes it's as simple as that. It doesn't have to be, oh, they went out and drank 12 beers like the other Monday night or whatever. Like it can be as simple as like, yeah, you kind of just let your focus slip. And maybe you weren't fully locked in for this one.
Yeah. Now, Scott, regarding the top players, because I didn't think the guys you mentioned, Lindholm, Geekie, Pastrnak, I didn't think they did much of anything. Obviously, Geekie gets a goal later in garbage time. But again, I want to see. Here's my thing with Morgan Geekie right now, and I've said this on recent episodes. I've said this for a few weeks now. He was such a prominent scorer for this team the whole first half of the season, just about, and dating back the last calendar year from December of 24 to December of 25. Don't need him being that scorer all the time, or should I say, don't expect him to be. But what can't happen is that when you're not scoring, that you're not doing anything else either. And I'm not trying to be harsh here and saying he hasn't done anything or created some chances. But when's the last time you can recall a game where you walked away from it and you're like, man, Geekie was a doggone raw steak on the puck tonight. He was relentless on forechecks. He was causing chaos. You know what? He's not finding the back of the net, but man, he's doing everything. But he's had some moments, but it's like, I just feel like I want more from him. And I'm not just talking about the production. And I think it's in him. He's not the most physical guy. I'm not asking him to be Cam Neely circa 1992 out there, but can you use your frame? Can you impact? Can you disrupt a little bit more? And I want to say the same about Elias Lindholm. Like Elias Lindholm, can you be a little bit more of a ball buster on the forecheck? Like he's positionally smart. Talking about Elias Lindholm, he's in the right spots, and I feel like a lot of times that makes up for his lack of aggression. But can he be a little bit more? You talk about Jason Robertson. I mean, Jason Robertson, Rupe Hintz, Maverick Borg, Wyatt Johnson. Did you see how annoying they were last night? They were relentless. Relentless is what I want to see out of Morgan Geekie and Elias Lindholm. And that doesn't mean you have to score every game to do that. That, to me, is an effort thing. And I just feel like if they start doing that, you might be surprised at some of the puck luck that comes your way. And I know this is going to sound like I'm joking. I'm really not. But you look at how Hustadinov's effort leads to turnovers and like opportunistic chances for the Bruins. Like when you're David Pastrnak and Hustadinov is creating those turnovers for you, well, now your all-world skill is going to take over, right? Like if you don't have that, I just don't think chances aren't just going to happen for you, right? Teams are too structured. The game's it's too well coached. You have to cause chaos. And I just don't see it as much as I want to from those guys.
Yeah, I think this transitions perfectly into the mailbag because one of the questions was about Geekie and about his recent slumps. So let's do this up. So yeah, so again, you can send us mailbag questions anytime. we haven't been doing as many. It's, sometimes it's just easy to get into the flow this season. And there's just so much to talk about, but definitely want to mix them in more. So send them to us, even if, like Brian mentioned earlier, like definitely during the Olympic break, we'll do full mailbag episodes. But we can mix in questions anytime. So email skatepod@wei.com, tweet at us at the skatepod, leave a comment on YouTube if you watch there. So this was from East Bay Brian, and it was a bit of a longer email, so I'm not going to go through all of it. He starts talking about David Pastrnak as a passer and how he thinks Pastrnak has grown into one of the best passers he's ever seen. His vision, hockey IQ, ability to thread needles are incredible. I think it contributes not only to the Bruins winning ways, but to his value as a leader. He goes into how that's allowed Sturm to kind of use Pastrnak on different lines with different wingers, different centers. But towards the end gets to, that said, how much of Geekie's prolonged slump would you attribute to him being on lines where he's the guy the defense focuses on first instead of Pastrnak? So basically, like, how much do we think this has Geekie not being on a 5-on-5 line with Pastrnak? How much do we think that's contributed to this recent slump that he finally broke the goalless drought? So now it's 1 goal in his last 13.
Well, it's a fair question. How can it not be a fair question? I think that it has more to do with what Geekie's not doing than what other teams are doing on him, to be honest with you. And it kind of goes back to what I was just saying. Like, I'm just not seeing the hunger out of him to want to snap. Like, I'm not saying he doesn't want to. I'm just saying it's not translating through my TV screen most nights. I'm not seeing a guy who's like showing that he's willing to do whatever it takes to get off the schneid. I see a guy out there who's like, if it comes my way and I capitalize, great. But he's not acting, he's reacting. He needs to go out there and he needs to make shit happen on his own. You cannot rely on David Pastrnak alone, if you're anybody else, to be responsible for your own fate. Obviously, David's going to help anybody on their line, but you know what I mean? Like, if you're not on his line, what are you going to do? Turn back into a pumpkin? Like, you have to have your own career for yourself. And I think that there was a time when Pastrnak was out of the lineup for 5-6 games, Scott, and he wasn't around for Geekie, and his production was still going. Like, him and Steves were probably doing really well at that point. Now, Steves is the guy, not to derail. He's, as expected, he's gone quiet, but Geekie, I don't think he needs Pastrnak. I do think it's true when they're separated that all of a sudden he does become the key focus to stop. That is true. But I don't see people, pulling out all the stops to stop Morgan Geekie. I just think he's not really doing enough.
Yeah, and I think if he was doing more of that other stuff, then that line with Pastrnak and Elias Lindholm and Geekie probably would have had more success earlier in the season, and maybe Sturm never thinks about breaking them up. Like, we talked about it. The reason they got broken up wasn't just to spread out the scoring. It was because that line actually hadn't been all that good at 5-on-5. Like, they were in the minus in terms of goal differential and in terms of chances and all that. And it's, you want to keep giving it chances to work, because that was a pretty dominant line down the stretch of last year when the Bruins had nothing else, but they at least had that line playing really well. But yeah, I think if you're going to compare like their play this year versus last year, I think it's all three of them. There's just a little bit less of that, being a dog, hunting pucks, whatever you want to call it. And it's like, if all three guys are doing a little less of it, then all of a sudden you just don't have enough of it as a line, which is why all of a sudden you put Geekie with Steves, and Steves is that guy, and it works a little better. And you put Husnudinov with Pastrnak, and Husnudinov's that guy, and it works a little better. So I think the lesson there and the takeaway for Geekie should be like, hey, if I do more of that stuff, I can make more things happen. And I think he's done that before. I think that's part of how he climbed in the lineup in the first place. Like, it wasn't all because of his shot; it was because of other things he was doing. So, yeah, I think that's still in there, and he's just got to get out of it a little bit, regardless of who line mates are. You are right to highlight Steve's going a bit quiet too. Like, that certainly doesn't help, right? Like, if you have, again, like, Geekie's got to get going regardless of what Alex Steves is doing. Like, those two don't have to be tied together. But if you have one of your line mates that you've had chemistry with at other times this season, and you've both kind of gone quiet together, like, well, then it just becomes that much harder to pull out of it, right? Because it's like Geekie's not making it happen himself, and also Steve's maybe isn't making as many things happen as he was earlier in the year. So, yeah, I mean, if you're Sturm, like, you just hope those guys can pull themselves out of it, because Sturm doesn't want to touch those top two lines, right? Like, regardless of how much they struggled Tuesday in a game where everyone struggled, those top two lines have been pretty dominant recently. And I know I highlighted their numbers on our last episode, but whether it's chances or just goal differential, like, both of those lines have been dominant during this, during that 8 out of 9 stretch. So I think Stern probably gives it, at least another game of these lines as is. But if it continues, then yeah, eventually he probably has to mix things up a little.
Okay. Why don't we go to Roger, huh, Scott?
Yeah, sure.
All right. Roger says there's been speculation already that the Bruins may move on from Victor Arvidsson before the trade deadline. At last year's deadline, they dealt a few players, Coyle and Carlo, who still had a little term left on their deals. Do you think there's any chance in the next few weeks the Bruins can move on from Hustadinov or Sean Corrali, who are close to the end of their current deals? Thanks, love the show. So Roger, I think Arvidsson remains the most intriguing one to me. That second line of Zacha, Middlestat, and Arvidsson, those are the three names that have been brought up a lot over the last, what do you want to call it, Scott, like 7-8 months about, could they flip them at some point? And we've talked about recently how they are among the most consistently utilized lines in the entire NHL this year. And they've been one of the better lines by certain metrics. Zacha, I think the team and the player are going to find mutual ground. I think Zaka's going to get a raise, and I think it's going to be at a fair percentage of the Bruins salary cap allowance. With the cap going up, I think it's going to be a sweet spot for both player and team. That's just my prediction. I don't know if it's going to come true. Middlestat, I see them punting on that potentially until next year during his contract year. Arvidsson's the one where it's like, will they rock the boat with that line, especially if they're in a playoff spot? I think that comes down to what's out there for him if people want him that badly. Kuzi and Corrali, I think Hustadinov is a guy that you keep. Like, I think he's a guy that, like, fits everything that you're trying to do going forward. He has speed, skill, tenacity, and youth, and I think he'll be affordable. So I don't look at moving Hustadinov as somebody that you'll get more value for coming back than what you're giving up. I think his upside is well worth keeping for the Boston Bruins for the future. I think he's part of the Bruins' future. Sean Corrali, I don't know, Scott. I just don't really see them doing it. Like, I just don't.
Yeah, I think they value Corrali as a leader and just a steady presence in that bottom six. And I guess, like, if someone comes along and is like, "Hey, we really want Sean Corrali," you're open to discussion, right? Like, Sean Corrali's not someone you absolutely need to keep around. But yeah, I'm not sure there's going to be a deal that's going to make that worth their while. Yeah, Hustadinov, I mean, 23 years old, signed for next year at $925,000, and then he's a restricted free agent after that. So he's under team control for years to come. I'm with you. Like, he's part of the future at this point. The question is just how big a part of the future, right? Like, are we talking about, a good third liner ultimately, or does he develop? He's playing the top six right now and holding his own. Like, is this a future top six guy? I'm holding on to him and finding out. Like, I don't see any reason to trade Hustadinov, even though his contract is up next year. He's under team control beyond that. So, Yeah, I would not be moving Husnudinov. Looking at other guys who have term, so to touch on Roger's point, like, yeah, Middlestad pops up. He's got another year after this. I guess probably worth noting he does not have any trade protection right now. He gets a 9-team no trade list starting July 1st. So maybe that matters, but that's still relatively limited protection. So yeah, I don't look. The Bruins probably aren't moving any of these guys with term if they're in a playoff spot, which, by the way, they still are even after the loss. So uh, a lot still depends on what happens between now and March 6th in terms of whether you're listening on any of those guys. Yeah, Zaka's name has popped up a bunch, but again, I don't think there's much appetite on the Bruins side to trade Pavel Zacha right now. Now, if these next couple weeks before the Olympics go poorly and then they come back from the Olympics and struggle, that it's really only a week between returning from the Olympics and the trade deadline. So there's not a whole lot of time to make any decisions then. But if they fall out, they're 4 or 5 points out of a playoff spot, that can change very quickly. I know people have brought up Mikey Asimont. I've had people ask me about that on Twitter a few times because he's been a healthy scratch here a bunch recently. He does have another year after this at 1.45 million. And I guess I kind of view that the same as Corrali, where I'm like, yeah, I guess if someone like really wants him, and look, I would have never guessed you're going to get a 4th round pick for Jeffrey VL. So I'm never going to say never on anyone. Now, different kinds of players, obviously very different roles. But if someone comes at you with a 3rd round pick from Mikey Asimont, sure, I'm probably taking that. But otherwise, like, look, you do need depth. So yeah, it stings for Asimont that he's been a scratch. I wonder if he gets in Thursday. I wonder if that's one change Sturm makes, right? Like, find a forward to take out for a game. Maybe it is Alex Steves, who we just talked about, has gone kind of quiet. Like, this could be an opportunity to get Asimont back in. So I wouldn't be in any rush to trade him, but sure, you could listen.
A couple follow-ups before we get to the next question, Scott. Zacha. I think he's making what, 4.75 right now, and next year, right? I mean, he's still making he's still making under $5 million even next season. But beyond next season, I think he'll be about 30 years old when he's up for a new deal. I mean, Geekie just signed for 5.5 this past off season. Like, with the cap going up, could you see them dishing out like 6, maybe 6.25 to Zacha for like 4 or 5 years, and like he gets his nice little $1.5 million raise, and it's really not much different against the Bruins cap space than future cap space and what it is now, like in terms of cap percentage. If the Bruins are still in a playoff spot or they're still competitive, I just don't see them moving him. To your point, if things go south and someone blows them away for Pavel Zacha, no one's well, he's certainly not untouchable. I just see the Bruins potentially wanting a guy like that to be around while younger forwards like James Higgins and some other younger players that come up over the next couple of years get their feet wet in the NHL. I mean, you always need some good veteran players, and not just players, but like top 6, top 4 defensemen, top 6 forward type players to mentor younger kids coming up. So if the Bruins get blown away for Pavel Zacha, yeah, I mean, you always make a deal if it makes your team better in the long term, but I just don't see him signing at a price that's going to be that much. I think it'll be a team friendly deal going forward too. He'll get his raise, but with the cap going up, I see it being a similar team friendly deal, and I just think the team and the player both want to be around.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, Pavel Zacha has said like he wants to be here. His wife's from here. Like, he was spending summers here even before he got traded to Boston. Yeah, I mean, he told me that earlier this season when there were trade rumors going around, and I asked him about it, and he said, he wants to just stay a Bruin. He also said that to Czech media recently. I saw that interview got translated. Yeah, it doesn't look. Everyone wants to get paid. It doesn't feel like Zacha would like hold out and push things for like the true absolute last dollar. Like it feels like he's the kind of guy who works with the team to get something that everyone's happy with. So I'm with you. I don't know what that number ends up being. I mean, look, he's not even eligible to sign an extension until July 1st. So it feels like the market is always changing and going up. So yeah, we can sit here now and say like, yeah, maybe it would be 6.5, right? Like Christian Dvorak with Philly just signed for 5 years, 5.15 a year on his extension. And I'm like, Zacha's better than Dvorak. So I don't know, bump that up $1 million a year. But all it takes is like 1 or 2 deals between now and then that reset the market even more. And now you get to July 1st and Pavel Zacha is a $7 million player when you start looking at comps. Yeah. Like, yeah, you know, so you just don't know. But ultimately, I do think there's a lot of space for those two sides to get something done there because I think they both want it. Like, yeah, I'm sure the Bruins would listen if they're blown away by something, but I do think their preference would be to keep Zacha.
Yeah, I mean he's a valuable player, and I know the market dictates, right? Especially when you're talking about his representatives. I also, while he's a valuable player, I also don't see him as somebody who's, you know, I mean he's a 55-point guy, right? Like, you know, for the most part, that's very valuable. It's top 6. The market is going to be what it's going to be for that type of player. I'm just saying, like, I don't think he can come in demanding the world. I think, you know, right. I don't think his representatives are that. Your representatives have to obviously try to get you the best deal, but you can't come in asking for anything obscure. I just, one other comment before we move on. Back to Husnudinov. I got some interesting comments from a lot of people during and after the Blackhawks game, because I made a comment online about how he's, at the time, he was a half a point per game guy this year, 22 points in 44 games, and talked about the trust and chemistry that had been building with Pastrnak. And I think a lot of it derives from, yes, Husnudinov's skill and creativity and his speed, but more so his tenacity. And I had multiple people saying that he kind of reminds them of a young Brad Marchand, not in the sense that he's going to be the next Brad Marchand. Brad Marchand is a Hall of Fame, arguably a Hall of Fame player, and certainly, you know, very well may have his number 63 retired to the Garden Raptors at one point and is a top 10 Bruin. But in terms of like similar attributes, if you think back to Brad Marchand back in 2010, right, when he first came up, he was a fourth line guy who had good quick speed. He was tenacious, and he obviously had some skill and creativity that nobody really knew was there until you saw it. And I do think, I agree with people, I think Husnudinov, he shows similar traits in terms of his skill, speed, but work ethic. And, you know, Brad Marchand was one of the premier left wingers in hockey his entire time on David Pastrnak's line. Brad Marchand got there because of Brad Marchand. But I'm not so sure it's a huge coincidence that Pastrnak is playing some good hockey right now with a guy who hunts pucks and does a lot of the dirty work with skill, similar to what Brad Marchand did for a long time. So make no mistake about it. Nobody in the comments, you nor I, nobody is saying that Marat Husnudinov is Brad Marchand. But can you share similar traits that made what I think is a Hall of Fame player successful in the NHL? Of course. I mean, speed, tenacity, and work ethic, those are traits that, you know, you can have within you whether you're a Hall of Fame player or not.
I'm gonna clip the 1.5 seconds there where you say Marat Husnudinov is Brad Marchand.
Well, no. I mean, you know, I think Kuzi's the greatest player of all time, right? But I can't be, you know, I can't go on record, right?
No, but it's a good point. Like, yeah, like it does. Yeah, it feels like if I had to project forward, I'd say like Husnudinov is a good middle six forward going forward and kind of long term. And maybe on a really good team, things come together and this is a cup contender in the next few years. Like I think he's like on the third line. Like that's kind of where I envision him. But he does feel like a player who you just shouldn't rule out him being more than that, right? Like it's still, again, this is a guy who still only has spent a couple years in North America since coming over. He's clearly gotten better this year than he was last year. So when you get those young players who are just kind of, you just see the upward trajectory and they just kind of keep pushing a little higher and higher. Like, yeah, don't put a ceiling on that just yet. Like, I might think he's a third liner ultimately, but would it shock me if he ends up, I don't know, let's say he's a 60, 70 point guy at some point 4 years from now? No, like that wouldn't shock me. I'm not going to predict it, but there's clear, you're right. There's the work ethic. There is some skill. There's hockey IQ. Like,
Yeah, he's a smart player.
yeah, definitely. So I'm not going to listen, like, he's not going to be a 110 point player, but like,
No.
I'm not going to put like a ceiling on like, well, he's only going to be a third liner. Like, I don't know. He might be more than that.
Yeah, no, no one's predicting that or projecting that, but you know he could be going into a one-on-one battle in the corner with Nikita Zadorov, and you don't have to question if Husindinov's effort's going to be there. And again, that's just it's admirable, and I do see the similarities in terms of just attributes like the speed, the skill, the work ethic, the compete, and then there's some intangible similarities too, like the fact that he's 23 years old. I mean, I think he got his first NHL games at 22, 23 years old. That's when he kind of first stuck in the league, was at age 23. Same with 63. Brad Marchand was 23 years old when he went from a fourth line. He started his 23-year-old season as a fourth liner. Right. And nobody projected that Brad Marchand at that time was going to go on to be what he became. So you just don't know what anybody's going to become, aside from like the Connor McDavids of the world and stuff like that. But when somebody is willing to work harder every shift than the guy next to them, those are the types of guys that you want to be very careful about, saying what they can and can't do, to your point, Scott. So anyway, I thought those comments were fascinating. I hadn't really seen that out there yet this year, but when I saw those comments to me, I'm like, yeah, you know what? That is true. Marshy was a pest, and he was creative, and he was working harder than the guy next to him, and kind of came out of nowhere. And anyway, so all right, we got a couple more questions here, Scott. We can get through these quickly. Justin says, "Here's what I don't understand about the Rasmus Andersson failed trade. Why were the Bruins trying to be buyers in the first place? I feel like everyone has been saying to just ride out this season or even trade away a couple of pieces. Has that changed? Is Sweeney going to try to add someone else now? What was the point of getting all of those picks and prospects last year if we're going to start trading them away now?" So, Scott, this is one of those questions where you just got to take a step back and realize that buying and selling is not always as black and white as buying and selling. There's a lot of nuance into both of those camps, and I'll let you try to go into it a little bit here.
Yeah, this is what a retool looks like, right? The Bruins told us they are not rebuilding. That's not how they view this. Now, we can sit here and debate like whether they should or shouldn't be doing that. I know there's still the people out here who want to like tear this thing down to the studs and suck for 4 years and eventually trade away Pastrnak and McAvoy for some reason. That's not what the Bruins are doing. That's not what they were intending to do last year at the deadline. So a retool means, yes, you do some trading away, but you also look for moves to make that can help you in the short-term future. Like, not just for the one thing we did see with this trade falling apart is the Bruins are not giving up premium assets for a rental, which I think we all agree is the right course, right? Like, this is not the year to be trading a first-round pick for someone you might lose after the season. Just doesn't make sense. And they weren't going to do that. When it was clear Andersson wasn't going to sign an extension, they walked away. So good for Don Sweeney. But if there's pieces out there who are under 30 and you can get with term because either they're already under contract or they agree to an extension when you get them, yeah, that's something this team's going to consider. And I don't think that's the wrong course of action at all. Like I think if you're the Bruins, you have to pick one of two things. One is either you're trying to win while you still have Pastrnak and McAvoy in their primes, or if you get to a point where it's like, well, this is going to take longer than that, then that's when you go into a rebuild. Then that's when you tear it down and you probably trade those guys away. They're just not there. They're going to try to do it the first way. They're going to try to get this back on track and build a team that can compete for a Stanley Cup within the next, call it 4 to 5 years before Pastrnak and McAvoy get to their mid 30s. And so if you find like, why did they want Rasmus Andersson? Because he's right in that same age range. He's 29 years old. So his prime aligns with those guys. It's the same window. Again, like, it's fair to question whether they've gathered enough pieces to do it within that window, but that is what they're going to try to do. So I think they're going to look for other moves like that. You know, I don't know the names. I don't know if it's another right shot defenseman. I saw people throw out Philip Roenick out of Vancouver, but Roenick has a no trade clause and has already said, told media that he wants to stay in Vancouver and see it through, and he has no intention of going anywhere. But I don't know, maybe that changes. Maybe it's Jason Robertson, who you just faced, whose name keeps popping up because the Stars seem unable to come to terms on an extension or unwilling to give him the money he wants. Maybe it's Robert Thomas or Jordan Kyrou in St. Louis. I don't know if you saw Dominic Tiano, who does quite a bit of like Bruins prospect stuff and minor league stuff, had an interesting tweet. He's not a person who just like throws stuff out there. Like I think when Dom tweets stuff like this, it's coming from an informed place. Mm-hmm. And he said that Don Sweeney's been talking to Doug Armstrong, St. Louis's GM, mostly about Team Canada stuff because they're both part of that management staff, but that it's his understanding that their talks have also extended beyond Olympic stuff, obviously suggesting trade stuff. Just found that interesting, just worth noting, because that's a team that's falling out of it. And like I said, like, has a couple real high-end pieces whose names just keep popping up in rumors over and over again. And it's one of those, like, where there's smoke, there's probably at least a little bit of fire. Like, I don't know if St. Louis ultimately trades away Robert Thomas or Jordan Kyrou. Those are two first-line forwards in their prime, signed into the early 2030s. But their names keep popping up, so like there's got to be something to it. I would be very intrigued by both.
1,000%, Scott. I mean, it's listen, the Rasmus Andersson stuff. He is, as you said, he's in the prime of his career. He's 29 years old. Pastrnak is 29. McAvoy is 28. Both Lindholms are 31. Zadorov is 30. Geekie's 27. Swayman's 27. It's like, hey, listen, if you aren't planning to try to win, you know, in the next year or two here, then you might as well ship all those guys out of here because they're not going to want to stick around for a whole rebuild. So if you want to tank and you want to suck and you know, draft at the top of the draft for the next 5, then get rid of those guys now. I'm not saying to do it, but that's what you talk. Then why keep them around? If that, like, no, of course you're not going to do that. So those guys are in their prime. You have James Higgins. You have 5 first-round picks in the next 3 years. So you do have the opportunity to trade one of them and still have multiples. You have some other prospects coming up as well. So there's a fine line between building for the future but not neglecting your present, especially when your present has some really good pieces, because the Bruins do. Now, Rasmus Andersson with an extension in place, I would have done, maybe a 2027 first round pick, because listen, that pick wouldn't be in the NHL if they do make it to the NHL, probably for another 3-4 seasons, right? They wouldn't be drafted for another couple. then probably a couple years of development, right? Well, now Pastrnak is 33. McAvoy's 32. So the 2027 pick, I was more okay with giving up for Andersson if Andersson had an extension in place. He fills a team need and he's in his prime. He's not 36, he's 29. No problem. Obviously, that deal fell through. When it comes to Robert Thomas or Jordan Kyrou, if the Bruins can get Robert Thomas, well, now I'm listening. Now I'm starting to really consider a pick in 2026 because Robert Thomas is 26 years old and he's the real fucking deal. Like he is a bona fide. I mean, he comes into Boston and he's, he's your best player next to David Pastrnak, certainly up front. And Jordan Kyrou, how old is Kyrou?
I think he's a year older than Thomas, so 27.
So, okay, so you're getting into a conversation now where it's like Rasmus Andersson, I didn't want to touch any one of those picks. If you can get Robert Thomas, there is no guarantee. In fact, I would probably bet that, chances are whoever you pick in 2026 does not end up being the player that Robert Thomas is at the NHL level. And oh, by the way, he's still only 26 years old. So, you're talking about a guy you could have for the next decade. If that's the case, then I start to say, okay, that 2026 first round pick, whether it's Boston's or Toronto's, I would probably move that for Robert Thomas because he's that good and he's still that young and he's a winner. He's got a Stanley Cup to his name. So I find that rumor, or not rumor, I don't know what you want to call it. If Don Sweeney and Doug Armstrong are having conversations about non-Team Canada things and it's centered around Robert Thomas, I'm probably willing to part with one of your 2026 first round picks for him. Because he's worth it and he's young enough. That is not an irresponsible move. That is not just a move for your present. Robert Thomas is still a part of your long-term future. So that's interesting to me.
Yeah. Like of those two,
why would they want to move him? He's probably for the same.
I don't
he's
know.
part of St. Louis's future too. He's still so young.
You would think, but like teams do some crazy things when things aren't going according to plan, right? Like St. Louis did not think they were going to be in, towards the bottom of the league this year. And the last few years just have not gone the way that franchise expected them to. So it feels like it would be a panicky type of move to me. But listen, if another team wants to panic, like, got to be ready to pounce. Yeah, I mean, to Thomas, because of his position, being a center, love that idea. I mean, this guy last 2 years has gone over 80 points. So talking about, he's a little under a point per game this year, but that's basically what you're getting. Jordan Kyrou has consistently been right around 70 points going back for like 4 years now. And if you get him, you're probably even buying a little bit of a dip because he has a career low shooting percentage this year that I would not expect to continue. But yeah, Robert Thomas, because he's a center, like, yeah, that's one where that's a name where I'm like, okay, now I'll put multiple first round picks on the table. Like, I'm willing to put one from each year, and then I'm still keeping one. Then I still have a first round pick.
He's got 429 points in 508 career games. Robert Thomas does, and he's a plus 43. Now I know plus minus is a bit of a skewed stat these days, but take that for what it's worth. Yeah, and look, you can still find ways to accrue further draft capital. Like if somebody wants to give you something if you feel like you can get a first round pick for somebody on your current roster that you don't think is long term, like you can still do that too. I mean, right now the Bruins have their own first round pick in 26. They have Toronto's first round pick in 26. They have Boston's first round pick in 27, Florida's first round pick in 27, Boston's first round pick in 28. That's just the first round, right? So you got 5 first rounders in the next 3 years. I'm really not touching their 26 first round picks outside of like something like we're talking about, where you're talking about a true NHL all-star. Robert Thomas, I wouldn't be. He's Canadian, yeah.
Yep.
I wouldn't be surprised at all if he's, if he has been in conversations to make Team Canada's roster. Like he didn't make it, I don't believe, but he's in the conversations to be a Canadian Olympian, and he's 26 years old and he's a Stanley Cup champion, and he's a true number 1 center. We're not talking about the second coming of Elias Lindholm here. He's a true number one center. And oh, by the way, you do have James Higgins coming. So like you know, that would be really nice to have. You still got to figure out the right side of your blue line, but that's
let me make this a little tougher for you.
Oh,
throw
fuck,
out this hypothetical.
You gonna bring in Higgins?
Yeah. Would you be willing to part with James Higgins in a trade for Robert Thomas?
Oh, fuck me. Is it James Higgins in the first, you said?
I don't know what the other pieces are. That maybe saves you from having to give up another first.
I don't know, Scott. I mean, I don't think so. I don't know. Like, it depends on the whole pack. I don't think so. No, because I think I still liked where the Bruins. No, I see that to me. And I know you could say, well, why would you not give up Higgins, but you give up a 26 first round to pick? Is it because I don't know who that player is? Like, you know what I mean? I know who James Higgins is, and you know he's got nearly a decade on Thomas. I mean, he's 18. Thomas is 26. You got Higgins. I think Higgins could be. Robert Thomas is what? He's a 75-point guy in the NHL, 70-point guy.
Yeah, he's been over 80 the last 2 years, 86 and 81.
I don't know. I like Higgins. You know, and you know why? I like Higgins' skating ability long term where the NHL is going. I don't think Robert Thomas is is he a burner? Is he a burner?
I honestly don't know enough about his skating ability.
He strikes me as a powerful skater.
Yeah.
I don't know if he's like a huge north-south guy. But he could be. I mean, correct me if I'm wrong. If it's Higgins in a first, I'm definitely not. But if it's Higgins in a second, it's tough. I don't know. That's tough, Scott. What are you doing?
I think Higgins in a first would be tough. I think I would start at this like as a baseline. If it was just Higgins for Thomas, 1-for-1, I think I would do it. So then it becomes like what else are you adding? How much are you adding? Yeah, like Higgins in a second, like that's where I'd have to give it like a lot more thought. Whereas like Higgins in a first, I'd probably shy away from pulling the trigger.
I know.
But I think because for me, I'm like Higgins might be as good as Thomas. Like he might turn into that. He also might not. Like I can see a world, and maybe fans would be really disappointed by this, but like I could see a world where Higgins at the NHL level is closer to a Pavel Zacha in terms of production than a Robert Thomas. Like I don't think that's insane to suggest.
No, it's not, Scott. I mean, it's
in which case it's so like, hard. Yeah, maybe I'll just take the Robert Thomas now. Like maybe I'll just take the guy who's already there.
No, it's a compelling argument. It really is. I know that anybody who would be asked this question outside of probably the Boston market would do that deal in a heartbeat, and they would call me or anybody else somebody who's fallen in love with their own prospects. Maybe that's true. I mean, because I can't say for sure what James Higgins will become, then yeah, of course I'm kind of like going on a limb and saying I wouldn't want to get rid of him. But his skating in his youth, and I don't know. I just don't think he come around prospects like that all the time. And I know Robert Thomas is that. He's that type of guy that came to fruition in the NHL level. So that's why it's so hard. But you know, at the same time, I don't know if you have to include Higgins in a trade for Thomas. Like I think if you're the Bruins, you could probably get a deal like that done with a collection of picks and maybe some lesser prospects. I don't know. Why are you gonna do that to me, Scott? Why do you gotta make me think about the idea of trading away James Higgins here on a Wednesday? I don't want to go there. I don't think I would do it. I just maybe I'm being naive. I just think the kid's gonna be really special, and his skating is just I don't know. Fuck, you just ruined my whole Wednesday. All right, we got one more question here.
Sure, yeah, we can. Maybe this one won't ruin it as much. This was from Mac the Fan 02 on Twitter. Said I had hoped to ask this before you recorded a new episode, so I think this was Monday.
Okay.
No problem, Mac the fan. We're getting into it on Wednesday. But wondering about the reaction to Minten being ranked in the 110s in the athletic prospect rankings. Seems low to me. I enjoy the show. Now, so let me clarify this a little because what he's referring to, this went up on the Athletic earlier this week. Or was this last week? This might have been last week. An article by Corey Pronman that importantly is not necessarily just a straight prospect ranking. It is the best NHL players and prospects under 23. So this is all under 23 players, including guys already established at the NHL level. So, like, for example, number 1 is Macklin Celebrini. Number 2 is Connor Bedard, Leo Carlson, Matthew Schaefer. Like, so you get the idea. Like this isn't just guys who haven't made it yet.
Mhm.
But yeah, Fraser Minten ended up just had it here, number 113. And so there were 2 other Bruins well, these are prospects who were on the list, and we just talked about one. James Hagens is 28 on this list. That, just to give you an idea, is in the same neighborhood as Michael Misa at 25, Simon Edvinson at 26, Roger McQueen, went a couple picks after Hagens, is playing at Providence. He's 29. Right behind Hagens, Cole Hudson 30, Porter Martone 31. So, like, that's a bunch of other college guys and, some other guys from the 2025 draft class. And then Dean Letourneau is just inside the top 100 at 97. So as far as Minten coming in at 113, yeah, I think I'd probably have him higher. My guess is the thinking here is that, I'm looking at the names ahead of him, and it's a lot of guys who are just drafted. So I'm guessing the methodology is just these guys in theory have more upside. Like it's like Carter Bear is a couple spots ahead of him. He was just drafted. Braden Coots, he just got drafted. Mason West just got drafted. Will Horkoff, who was just on the U.S. junior team. Vaclav Nestrasil, freshman at UMass, who played for Czech Republic at World Juniors. So it's like, this is a lot of younger guys who I would guess the argument would be in theory they have more upside, but I would have Minten ranked higher because he's already doing it. Like he's already establishing himself as at the very least a good third liner in the NHL. So I guess it probably comes down to like floor versus ceiling type of thing. Like Fraser Minten has a way higher floor than all these guys around him, but I guess maybe the argument would be he doesn't have quite as high of a ceiling.
Yeah, it's always, I don't know, these rankings, these lists are always I kind of roll my eyes at them because it's like, all right, so we're going to say that Dean Letourneau, who, listen, he's having a great year at BC. Really happy to see that. But we're going to have him, higher on a list right now than a guy, like significantly higher, like 25, 7 guys higher than a guy who's got 23 points in 50 games this year at the NHL level at 21 years old. Like, I just, so the whole game of like ceilings and upsides, it's just, I don't got time for it. You know what I mean? Like you want to rank what somebody's ceiling could be at the NHL level while they're in the minors or while they're in college hockey or juniors versus a guy who's, currently playing at the NHL level and doing it. I don't know. There's no guarantee that any of those guys that aren't at the NHL level get there. Like you have to get there first. Can you get there first? I know most of these guys will, right? I mean, they're drafted high enough, but you just never know. Like, is Dean Letourneau ever going to play an NHL game? Well, based on this season at BC, I would say, yeah, I do think Dean Letourneau will touch the ice at the NHL level at some point in his career. I do think so. But you never know. I mean, you never know. I think he will, but you never know. So this time last year, I don't know if any of us were confident that he would have, despite his youth at the NCAA level and being a year ahead of where he should have been. But I think Minten's probably a little bit lower than he should be on this list. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it is wise to never take lists like this like as gospel, so like don't get too worked up over them. I always find them interesting. Like I'll be the first. I'm getting sucked in by it. I'm going through the whole list as soon as I see it pop up. So
Where's
like,
Easton Cowan? Do you see him there?
ooh,
Because Easton Cowan is a guy that he was Toronto's top prospect ahead of Fraser Minten, and I think that Minten's a guy they were willing to part with last year, but not Cowan. And Cowan is, to this point, they're comparable. I feel like they're comparable.
yeah.
So I'm curious if he's significantly higher.
Easton Cowan is 88.
Yeah, it's probably where he should be. That's kind of where I feel like, on a list like this, maybe that's where Minten could be around there, somewhere like that.
Yeah. A couple others that just notable to me. So 95, 2 spots ahead of Letourneau is Sasha Boisvert from BU, who just got suspended for fighting. But first round pick of Chicago. In that draft, in that 24 draft, he was a player I was hoping would fall to the Bruins, but I kind of knew wasn't going to. He ended up going 18, and then obviously the Bruins get Letourneau at 25. I mean, now they're separated by 2 spots. Like maybe, wasn't. And then one other one I wanted to highlight from there. So Liam Greentree, who went 1 spot behind Letourneau. And remember, while Letourneau didn't score last year at Boston College, Liam Greentree was lighting up the OHL. Everyone was talking about how the Bruins made this huge mistake, taking Letourneau over Greentree. Want to know where Liam Greentree is on this list? He is 134, 37 spots behind Letourneau. Just a reminder, like when these kids are 18 years old, a lot changes in a year. Mm-hmm. So, maybe everyone is saying big mistake taking Letourneau over Greentree. A year later, doesn't look so bad.
Scott, how many prospects are on this list?
It goes 137 deep.
Is Patra on that list, or Zellers, or anybody like that?
Nope. Those were the only 3 Bruins: Hagens, Letourneau, Minten. I would wonder about how close Zellers got.
Yeah,
he doesn't have like, sometimes it's like a long list of honorable mentions. He doesn't have that here, but
137 is a random number to stop at. Why don't they just go 150? Here's our top 137 prospects. Oh, thanks.
Just like ran out of time. I was like, well, this is how far I got. Let's publish.
Yeah, exactly. It feels like it's unfinished business. Yeah. Okay. All right, Scott. That is interesting indeed. Any final thoughts from you before we sign out here?
Speaking of the list, I saw that both Scott Wheeler from The Athletic and I think it was Cam Robinson at Elite Prospects, or it might have been a group ranking at Elite Prospects. Both came out with updated draft rankings on Tuesday. So again, I'm just a sucker for this stuff, but thought it was notable keeping it just to a couple local college players who could potentially be of interest to the Bruins. Tynan Lawrence at BU, who has gotten off to a bit of a slow start there, does not have a point through 5 games with the Terriers. I think he was 6th on the athletic list and 11th on the Elite Prospects list. So a little bit of variance there. And also Oscar Hemming, big winger who came into BC for the second half, who had not played anywhere in the first half, had a whole complicated issue with another team, is now at BC on a line with Dean Letourneau, actually. Big boy line, 6'7" Dean Letourneau, 6'4" Oscar Hemming. He was 21st on the athletic list, 12th on the Elite Prospects list, right behind Lawrence.
He's right in range where both of Boston picks, I think, are going to be.
Yeah, I've talked to people who think he's going to rise into the top 10 and maybe even the top 5 if he has a strong enough finish. Like I actually think he's one of the most interesting prospects in this draft, just because he didn't play the first half. So like no one's seen anything this year from him. And now, he's on a good team at BC and playing with some good players and has like a real chance to potentially boost his stock.
Mike Felger will have a field day with that one, huh? If the Bruins draft him. But again, it's like he's ranked where he's ranked, but if he's truly that good of a prospect, which I believe he is, if you're the Bruins, like he's going where he's projected, and he's right in our backyard. It makes sense. Playing with other prospects of ours.
It was funny. I went to the BC game Friday against Providence, and it was an ESPNU game. So John Butchergross and Colby Cohen had the call, and I ran into them before the game, and we were just talking, and they're like, so do you still do like a lot of the college stuff? And I was like, yeah, a little bit here and there. And they're like, well, I guess covering BC is kind of just like covering the Bruins. And I was like, yeah, they got all their prospects, and they're going to draft Oscar Hemming this year. So I'm kind of already calling that.
Yeah, no, the Bruins are the only team in the NHL with an NHL team, an AHL team, an ECHL team, and an NCAA team. So It's pretty fascinating. But one last comment from you, Scott. Ivan Stenberg. Was he projected first?
Ivar Stenberg.
Ivar. Was he projected first on those rankings?
Yeah, he was first on the athletic list. I think he was still second on the elite prospects list, behind McKenna.
Okay. I mean, just generally speaking, do you feel like, listen, his World Juniors tournament was outstanding, Stenberg, obviously, and he's playing a man's game overseas right now as an 18 or 17-year-old, whatever he is at the moment. And there's no doubt about it that his game is the most mature right now of those high-end forwards to go. And so I understand why people are falling in love with him, especially to go first overall. Do you think it's possible that he would be a fantastic player for any NHL franchise to have? But do you think teams need to be careful about putting too much stock in the maturity of an 18-year-old's game or 17-year-old's game and potentially passing on what could be a long-term, just like cannot miss player in like Gavin McKenna, whose all-around game is still growing? Do you think that is something that's challenging for teams when they're evaluating that maybe picking at the top of the draft this year?
It's definitely worth considering, and I do think some of the blowback on Gavin McKenna, like some of it's gone too far, but some of it has been totally fair. Like when you watch him, there are unfortunately like shifts off where he just doesn't seem engaged, where his compete isn't there. And yes, it's easy to be like, well, he's not even 18 yet. Like what, like lay off the kid. But it's like, you're also talking about the number one pick in the future of your franchise. He knows he's battling for the spot in a draft year. Like that shouldn't happen, right? Like it tells you something that like that compete level has waxed and waned a bit this season. So I think there's and by the way, I stand corrected. Elite prospects did have Stenberg ahead of McKenna as well. 1-2. So yeah, like there is an element of, I think there's this feeling, especially coming out of World Juniors, that like, yeah, maybe Gavin McKenna is more purely talented, but Ivar Stenberg is the kind of player you win with, and Gavin McKenna just puts up a lot of points. And like, that's way too simplistic. So yes, teams need to guard against that a little bit, but I think teams and scouts are like really going to want to see something from McKenna down the stretch for a Penn State team that, maybe isn't the national title favorite, but will be in the NCAA tournament and will be competing for it and will be competing for a Big Ten title. Like the team front offices are going to want to see like, okay, Gavin McKenna, like step up and lead Penn State to victory in these trophy games down the stretch of the college season.
Do you think that the hockey world sometimes is too quick to build players as generational talents? Because
yes,
I'm not saying, yeah, because like McKenna obviously could be one of those, but and listen, the highlights he was putting up in the CHL last year, I mean, over 2 points per game average, and he was just toying with people. And the CHL is a fantastic combination of leagues. There's no doubt about it. It's not as mature as NCAA, but the talent is stupid. Okay. Now, you watch those and you're like, there's no way this kid doesn't go first overall. You never had to question if Connor McDavid was going first overall or Sidney Crosby or Macklin Celebrini, or just, those true players that go first overall, like they're uncontested. Gavin McKenna clearly is contested right now, and probably not just by Ivor Stenberg. So I don't know, the fact that it's even a question that he's going first overall now, maybe that speaks to pump the brakes on if we think he's the next, McDavid or Bedard or Celebrini or whatever, Crosby. So I just think that's interesting because the hockey world was head over heels for him. And now a lot of people are kind of like, oh, his game's not all it's cracked up to be. He's inconsistent. He's all flash. So I don't know. It's just an interesting story to follow. And it's a very interesting case study. And again, you're talking about 17, 18-year-old kids. Like, you know what I mean? Most kids at that age, they're still in science class in high school, right? And people are trying to see if they can win a Stanley Cup with them in 5. It's like, Gavin McKenna might be all flash, but Stenberg could be the next Sasha Barkov. That's like just like that real stout. Like, you know what I mean? It's like, okay, you may be right. You may be right. Or Stenberg ends up becoming, Ryan O'Reilly, who you win a cup with. But like, I just, it's just, I don't know. It's interesting.
Yeah. And it's like, okay, yeah. So McKenna, as a 17-year-old in college, isn't doing what Macklin Celebrini did. And, and actually, like, if you remember, going into that year for Celebrini, he was, I would say, the expected number 1 pick, but it wasn't a slam dunk. Like, I talked to people, and Cole Eiserman was in the U.S. development program at the time. He wasn't in college yet. But going into that year, I talked to people who thought Eiserman was going to end up being the number 1 pick. And then, obviously, both guys kind of went the other way, where, like, Eiserman actually slid. Celebrini, through his play as a freshman at BU, really put a stranglehold on that, where probably by November or December, honestly, there was no real question about it. But yeah, so it's like, unfortunately for McKenna, like, that's kind of the standard of, if you're going to be the generational stone cold lock type of player, like, you got to do what Celebrini did, which he isn't doing. So you can still be number 1 pick without doing that, though. Like, yeah, to your first question, yes, people throw around the generational label way too often. There just is not a Macklin Celebrini in every draft, and I don't think there's one in this draft. So, McKenna could still be a good number 1 pick, even if he's not going to be Macklin Celebrini. But like, there's no real shame in that, or at least there shouldn't be. But yeah, like, we're going to go through this next year because 2027 draft, Landon DuPont's going to get tagged with the label of generational defense prospect. And it's like, well, is it going to be better than Matthew Schaefer, who like just went first overall in 2025? Like, people gotta, it's exciting. It gets clicks, makes headlines. I get it. But sometimes it's not really fair to the kids.
Speaking of Macklin Celebrini, and holy smokes, we're going long here, Scott. But right now, if the playoffs were to start, Macklin Celebrini would be going up against Nathan MacKinnon in round 1 of the Stanley Cup playoffs. Nathan MacKinnon, Cale Makar, Natchez. I mean, it's just Colorado is an absolute wagon among all wagons this year. But San Jose, while I don't think anybody would expect them to win that series, to see Celebrini go up, and Celebrini, as skilled as he is, his work ethic matches it and then some. That would be fun to see Celebrini go up against what, in my opinion, is the best team in hockey, obviously, and a lot of people's opinions. And Celebrini has a good supporting cast too. Like, they're up and coming. I mean, he's got Will Smith. Toffoli is a good support character. Michael Misa's young. They just brought in Kiefer Sherwood. There's some other guys too in San Jose that they're playing clearly they're playing good hockey. They're a playoff team right now. So that'll be hey, Scott, get your popcorn. You want popcorn? Get your popcorn ready.
Or San Jose gets up to 3rd in the Pacific Division, which right now they're tied with Anaheim on points for that spot. And you get Edmonton, San Jose first round. You get Celebrini against McDavid and Draisaitl.
Yeah. Yeah, I know San Jose's they've been bad for a while, and they're stockpiling these picks. And I just going into the year, I thought their defense was not going to be nearly good enough. And hey, listen, at a certain point, you are what the standings say you are. And we saw the Bruins play San Jose earlier this year. San Jose was fucking good in that game. Like, they took it to Boston, a lot of it. So they have some. I don't know if they're ahead of schedule for their standards. I think they're ahead of a schedule for maybe a lot of, mutual NHL observers standards. But Celebrini is obviously scoring at nearly he's averaging 1.6 points per game this year or something like that. It's insane.
It's crazy.
It's insane. Scott, did you know that there's 12 of the 14 Canadian forwards for the Olympic team are averaging over a point per game this season? Good luck.
It's ridiculous.
Good luck stopping that group. It's crazy. Anyway,
I'm glad we came full circle. We started with BU loss in the Bean Pod, but now we're finishing celebrating Celebrini. This has been good for me.
Exactly. All right. Well, thank you all very much for listening. Enjoy Bruins and Vegas on Thursday night, and myself, Scott, and Bridget will be back on Friday morning to talk to you all. Take care. Hey guys, thanks for watching the Skate Podcast. If you want to see more of our videos, visit our playlist.
Not in front of a screen? You can listen to us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, or wherever you get your podcasts.
Don't forget to follow us on social media. And if you enjoyed this video, please don't forget to give us a thumbs up, subscribe to our channel, and leave a comment.